This is the Living Tower by Verner Panton, and they cost $28,740. But what if I could just build one myself? After all, if you Google the 1970s Living Tower, you can easily see a breakdown of all the required materials, and there's only 3 of them. So it can't be that hard to build, right? Plus, I built a whole Instagram career on building designer furniture on a budget. And while I've never built something this complex or anywhere even close to it, it taught me that this concept is definitely possible. So can I fully recreate the $30,000 Living Tower so it looks just as good as one you would find in a high-end furniture store? And finally, my goal is to do this for under 500 bucks. So let's get started. All right, guys, does anything look different? Now, you may have noticed that there's no more Christmas decorations in the background. It's October, and I recorded that last part in January. And it's been such a roller coaster to even get to filming this. I mean, question 1, where do we start? Google, more specifically, the Vitra website to see the exact dimensions of the Living Tower. Now, luckily, Vitra is pretty transparent, and they list some of their main measurements like length and width online. And while that's great, it's clear they left some of the more intricate dimensions off of the webpage intentionally, like these inside seats. There's no listing of those on the webpage. But I came prepared, so don't worry, I have a solution. Verner Panton, the original designer, and myself are the same height. 5'9". So with a few hours of measurements and seeing from photos exactly how he was able to fit in the Living Tower, well, I knew exactly how I should fit in the Living Tower. So on screen here, you can see all of the dimensions that I was able to come up with, and spoiler alert, and not to flex, but this turned out perfectly. And just like that, we're officially ready for materials. So I went to Home Depot and bought as follows: 3 sheets of 3/4 inch thick plywood, with pieces 1 and 2 pre-cut to 40 by 80, and the third piece to 24 by 80. Then I got 15 8-foot 2x4s, all pre-cut to 24 inch pieces. And all this was for a grand total of 140 bucks, which puts us in a great spot with 360 left to spend. Alright, so now that we're back at home and our materials are officially inside, well, it's time to start our build. And whether you're brand new to building furniture or have just never built something like this, well, I know this can be a very intimidating step, so let me break down exactly how this process should go. First, we'll take our plywood and, using all those measurements from earlier, sketch our tower shape. And after cutting that out, we'll take these new shapes and screw them to those thinner pieces of plywood. And after that plywood shell is together, we'll take our 2x4s and use those to bridge the gap, adding those all around the inside seats, which will then complete our frame. Now, as far as the woodworking process of this build goes, yes, it is just as easy as it sounds, and honestly, this is 90% of building all furniture. But without further ado, and minutes into this video, well, I think it's time we officially start building. So like I said before, up first is our sketch. As you know, I came into this step overly prepared. So with all those dimensions from earlier, well, this step only took 5 minutes. And next up, I grabbed my jigsaw, clamped my wood to the table, and started cutting. And somehow, even after all of this pre-planning, I accidentally cut one of the sides of the Living Tower right in half. Genuinely, I wish you could see my frustration on camera, but you can see how I fixed it using a metal bracket. And I can even confirm 10 months later, yes, that thing is still holding on. But nevertheless, the frame of this thing is coming together. So after screwing all parts of the shell in, well, we're on our last step, which is filling in our inside seats. Or I will give a PSA or a warning of how mind-numbing this step really is, because it's just screwing in a 2x4, walking to the other side of the tower, screwing it in again, and doing that 60 times. But I guess if something being too easy is a problem, well, I'll take that issue any day. Now, as you can see, we are almost at the point where the frame of this build is completely done, which I would call an extremely successful day. But unfortunately, that's just to speak for the woodworking part of this process, because next up, we are about to foam it in. Get it? Because the next step of this process is to cover the entire frame in a 2-inch thick layer of foam. Now, I will admit that this step isn't tricky or complicated whatsoever, but it does take a few days, and personally, it took me even longer than building the frame. So I took a drive over to Michael's and grabbed 10 rolls of project foam. And after checking out, that puts our current budget at $290, which actually had me getting very nervous because I'm taking this $500 budget extremely seriously and I'm not going over that. So that doesn't put a lot of money left. But once we got back home for this step, I'm just laying down our frame, grabbing a mix between hot glue and construction adhesive, and gluing down every visible square inch to the Living Tower. And while I just had excess glue laying around the apartment, to be fair, I am gonna add 20 bucks extra into the budget, which has me even more nervous, but trust me, we'll get there. So while I did spend excess time for each sheet of project foam weighing it down with my own hands, I also had Megan to do the same, so that kind of cut the time down. But definitely make sure once you add glue to the project foam to be pushing it down and making sure it is weighted properly to the wood. And really, you could be a toddler doing this step successfully. It is really that simple. You're just gluing down foam onto wood, pushing it down, waiting a little bit, and then doing it to every other square inch of the tower. Like, no complications happen during this step. It's just as easy as it sounds. And here lies the moment that I have been dreading getting since we started this build, because at this point, I had genuinely no idea what I was doing. We're getting edgy on this channel. Because in my entire woodworking career, I had been intentionally avoiding this step, and that is of course sewing and fabric. But at this point, I had never bought fabric, I had definitely never sewn, I've never even used a sewing machine. So I ended up going to the one place where I absolutely knew could help in this exact situation. Okay, now in case you're confused at why I just came to a Spirit Halloween, well, that is of course because just a few months ago, this was a Joann Fabrics, which is now out of business. Because originally I had only come to Joann's with one goal, and that was to find guidance. I wanted to know which type of fabric they recommended, or which type of foam even to get. What I definitely did not expect was for the first employee that I talked to offer to come along the journey, come to my house, and help build this. And that was of course because I ran into the one man who would offer this, and that was Kevin.
Hi, my name is Kevin. I'm a 70-year-old retiree. Part-time, I work as, not going to believe it, but Santa Claus. It only seems to work in November and December. I've also upholstered furniture, so I have some qualifications to advise people on what to do for sewing and upholstering fabric.
That's perfect. So when I had asked him for help or advice on how to build this piece, he said, "Why don't I just help you do it?" That wasn't what I expected to hear in response, but I absolutely accepted those terms, and I said, yeah, come to my home and help me out. And that's exactly what he did.
It was pretty convincing that I really needed to help him because he didn't have a clue on what he was going to do for upholstering. And because I have experience upholstering furniture, I knew what steps to take.
And so now that it was officially time to face my biggest fear, here were the exact steps that we took. So after buying all the orange velvet in Joann's, specifically 5 rolls, we went back to my house, Kevin brought his scissors and staple gun, and we got to work. Now we started by laying our fabric directly over the sides of the tower, and then tracing our shape. Then we laid all of our fabric on the floor, followed that line that we had traced, and cut it out. Now if you're following along specifically, leaving an extra 2 inches of room on each side, if you don't do that, you're gonna be out of a lot of money. Then we picked back up our fabric, put it on each respective side of the living tower that it matched up to, and started stapling it in. Now luckily, staples are extremely inexpensive because otherwise we would have been cooked. This takes thousands of staples. But after a few hours of stapling in our fabric to the frame, well, I felt like a kid on Christmas morning, even just seeing one side of the living tower done. And luckily, the day we filmed this was actually Christmas Eve, and I had Santa Claus at my house, so the timing couldn't have been better. But with all 4 sides being the exact same process, well, the one that was a little bit different was the inside seats. Now, final reveal of the budget very soon, but it just kept going up and up because Kevin then brought over a material called padding, which you need for every single sofa or seat that you're building. So for all the seats, we put our padding on top of the foam, added a ton of tension to the fabric by pulling it as we stapled to make sure there were no creases, and while continuing to add staples every place we added fabric. And once our padding and fabric is on and our staples are all in, well, we officially have a really ugly piece of furniture. No, it's not done. And that's where a material that I genuinely never even heard of comes in, which is our secret weapon here, and that's called piping. Now, if you're like me and don't know what that is, simply put, it's a cheap, thin rope that you wrap in fabric and runs along the seams of basically all furniture, specifically used to hide rough edges, or in our case, staples.
We ended up with 1/2-inch piping that covered all of the seams, which was really kind of a phenomenal thing to do. Once I gave Matt the direction to do it, and Matt did all of the piping. He used my sewing machine, he sewed the fabric. He then came in and we stapled down and then glued all of the piping on, which just gives us a finished product, which is actually quite remarkable.
In your opinion, do you think without your help I would have been able to do that?
Well, before I answer that, what is your answer? Because I would go either. I don't think you could.
Okay, well, I couldn't have, so I'm glad we're on the same page with that.
Could not have done this himself. My personal opinion, he didn't even know how much fabric to order, so I would say no, he could not have done this by himself. And it's a good thing that he ran across somebody that could perhaps give him some guidance, and he found me.
And after all of that hard work, getting over a fear of sewing, having a new best friend in their late 70s, we officially have the living tower. And I think it's only fitting now to cue you in on how much we spent and what the overall total was to build this. And it came out to $555. I mean, with how many unexpected and extra materials we ended up bringing in with Kevin, I think it's a miracle we even got it done for that price. Overall, it wouldn't even have been possible if we didn't absolutely overuse Kevin's employee discount. I know I can confidently say that because Joann's is officially out of business, so it doesn't risk Kevin's job because that doesn't exist, but we were getting fabric materials and supplies for pennies on the dollar. Truly, the fact that I ran into Kevin and was able to get it for that price and all that help is a miracle. So I like to think with the leadership of Verner Panton, then Vitra is a pretty chill company and won't send me a cease and desist for adding all of that information in one video. And I think anybody who makes this will not be disappointed. Truly, this is the coolest shit to have in your apartment. So I want to thank everybody so much for watching this video. Genuinely, I put a lot of hard work into this, and I hope it showed. And fun fact, my wife and I actually just appeared on the reality show, The Amazing Race, and when we were doing our intro package, they showed the Living Tower in its infancy, so I think that was really cool. I mean, just getting the Living Tower seen in front of millions and millions of reality TV fans, kind of sick. And this probably goes without being said, but I have to give an extra special thank you to Kevin. From his friendship to his craftsmanship and all the help, this probably wouldn't have been possible without him. I think had I had access to a video like this, well then maybe, but without that, no, this wouldn't have been possible without him. And the next project I'm embarking on is the DUNE sofa, and that's like the DIY final boss, and Kevin is gonna be back to help with that project, so you're gonna see more of it. But with all that being said, I think it's officially time to sign out, so thank you so much for watching. Please just leave a like, comment, subscribe, and do all that jazz. My name has been Turner. You guys have been YouTube. This has been Verner Panton's Living Tower, and all right, I'll see you later.